All right, let's get right into it. We hear it all the time, right? The clock is ticking on climate change. But it feels like, for all the talk, we're hitting a wall. Today, we're going to break down why there's this growing global backlash against climate policies and what that actually means for all of us. And it really all starts with this one central paradox.
So check this out. This is the paradox at the very heart of the problem. In 2024, we installed more solar panels, more wind turbines than ever before. That sounds like a huge win, doesn't it? But in the exact same year, we also burned more oil, gas, and coal than at any other point in human history. We're not actually replacing the old energy sources, we're just piling new ones on top. And as you can imagine, that paradox is fueling some massive political tension.
So, to really understand this backlash, we've got to face a pretty uncomfortable truth first. Despite all the promises, all the big global summits, all the talk, we are just not on track. Not even close. Now, you remember this, right? The Paris Agreement. It felt like this huge moment of global unity back in 2015. Pretty much the whole world agreed on one critical target: keep global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Think of it as our global report card. So, how are we doing?
Well, this number is kind of crucial. Before 2015, the planet was warming at a rate of about 0.2 degrees per decade. Since the Paris Agreement, the very thing that was supposed to slow this all down, the rate has actually sped up to 0.35 degrees per decade. We're not just failing to hit the brakes, it feels like we're stepping on the gas.
And this is where that acceleration is taking us. At this current pace, scientists are now projecting we will blow right past that 1.5-degree limit by 2029. Let that sink in for a second. That is just a few years from now. And if you zoom out and look at the long-term picture, it's even more sobering. If we just stay on the path we're on right now, we're not looking at a 1.5-degree world or even a 2-degree world. We are on track for a planet that is over 3 degrees warmer, and that is just not a legacy that anyone wants to leave behind.
So, what does this gap between ambition and reality actually look like on the ground? Well, let's just take a country like Canada for an example. The official goal is a 40 to 45% cut in emissions by 2030. That's super ambitious. But the actual progress they've made so far? Just 8.5%. And look, this isn't just a Canadian story. We see this pattern repeating in a lot of developed countries. And this slide, wow, this just perfectly illustrates why this is so incredibly hard. We've had climate policies in place for 3 decades, and yet after all that time, the world's energy mix looks stubbornly the same. Over 80% of all the energy that powers our civilization still comes from burning oil, gas, and coal. Our entire global economy is just deeply, fundamentally hooked on them. This deep dependence creates a massive political opening. When policies like carbon taxes make filling up your car or heating your home more expensive, populist movements can really tap into that economic anxiety. They can frame climate action as this threat from an out-of-touch urban elite. A slogan like this, it isn't just about oil anymore, it's about cultural identity and a real resistance to change. Now, this slide here is fascinating because of what it says about our priorities as a species. In 2024, the world spent $2.7 trillion on military budgets. In that same year, we invested about $1.6 trillion in what we call climate finance. We are literally spending more money to protect ourselves from each other than we are to protect our shared home from a climate crisis. So you look at all this, the missed targets, our deep dependency on fossil fuels, the political backlash, and honestly, it's easy to feel a little hopeless. Which brings us to the big question. Is this whole thing a lost cause? And that brings us to the second truth, which is just as important. No matter how hard this is, giving up just isn't an option. The consequences are way too serious. So the real challenge isn't whether we should act, but how we can act in a way that actually works. Any successful climate strategy has to juggle these 3 big constraints. First, you've got the urgency. The science is basically screaming at us that the clock is ticking. Second, there's the sheer magnitude of the task. We're talking about rebuilding the very foundation of our civilization. And third, and this is the one that trips everyone up, you absolutely need public support. People have to believe the transition is fair and that it won't leave them broke or jobless. And this quote right here, it's the absolute core of the political puzzle. It just nails the central tension. How do you possibly unite the existential fear of climate collapse with the very immediate, very real anxiety of just paying your rent or buying groceries? That is the tightrope that every leader has to walk. So, how do we do it?
Is there a realistic way forward that actually respects both the planet and people's paychecks? Well, the good news is yes. Let's take a look at what that pragmatic path might look like.
So, the first thing to remember is that this green transition isn't just some policy idea, it's an economic and technological reality that's already happening. Solar, wind, batteries, they're all on this unstoppable cost cutting curve because of economies of scale. The market itself is becoming a really powerful engine for change, whether we like it or not.
And it's not just technology. Geopolitics is creating powerful new reasons to change, too. European countries, for example, are desperate to stop relying on Russian energy and Chinese critical minerals. This creates a huge opportunity for stable, democratic countries like Canada to step in and become the reliable suppliers of the resources and tech the world needs for a green economy. So what can a developed nation really do? Well, for a country like Canada, it means playing to its strengths. It can lean into its tech leadership, responsibly develop the huge mineral resources needed for all those batteries and EVs, and expand its long-standing expertise in nuclear power, especially with these new, safer, small modular reactors that are critical for countries that want energy independence. These are real, concrete things that can be done. So let's bring this all together. The path forward isn't really about choosing between the environment and the economy. It's about finding a smart way to make them both work together. The main takeaway is this. Success here isn't about blind optimism or giving in to cynical despair. It's about having a tough-minded combination of two things. First, an unwavering determination to meet the scientific reality of the crisis. And second, a deep, practical understanding of the economic and political realities that people face every single day. And that brings us right back to where we started, with this incredibly powerful idea. The ultimate goal is to solve this one equation. It's all about finding that common ground between two very legitimate, very powerful human fears, and keeping those two groups of people united, not pulling them apart. And really, that's the question we want to leave you with. It's not just a question for politicians or big-shot CEOs, it's a question for all of us. How do we build a future that's both sustainable for the planet and secure for everyone? Thanks for tuning in.